Welcome to Writers Talking Screen. On behalf of the Writers Guild of Canada, thank you for joining us for this very special conversation between winners of the WGC Awards in the children's and preschool category. We have today Ben Joseph, Mike DeCenzo, Christine Mitchell, and myself. As I said, I'm Mike Folk, and I won it last year, and we will be talking now to the winners of the 2023 WGC Awards. Following our conversation, we're going to have about 15 to 20 minutes for audience questions, so please feel free to add yours to the Q&A at any time. And I'd like to point out that this event also features auto-generated closed captioning. It's being recorded and will be shared on the Guild's YouTube page and featured on our Writers Talking Screen podcast. So we're going to get started in just a minute. But before we get going, we'd also like to acknowledge that although this event is online, we each live and work on ancestral Indigenous land. And as we gather today, we'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit on which the City of Toronto and our office stands. We give our thanks and respect for their leadership of Indigenous land defenders across the country, for always being on the forefront of protecting the earth and all the life that sustains it. And we're grateful to have the opportunity to work in the community of this territory. So now let's introduce our panelists. We have first up Christine Mitchell. Christine is a writer, a kids content creator, and a visual artist. And after writing a master's thesis in linguistics and a PhD dissertation on the history of computer translation, so she is smarter than everyone here, that's fine. Her desire to write fun, made-up stuff took over. She's written Peekabeans, a series of augmented reality preschool books, as well as episodes of children's animation for Wishfart, which we are going to get into that, Ollie's Pack, Team Zenko Go, and more. She won the 2023 WGC Screenwriting Award for the Guava Juice Show episode Adventure 9000. Next up, we have Mike DeCenzo. He burst onto the scene as an actor, appearing in over 100 episodes of television before making the switch to screenwriting. He went on to story coordinate 8 seasons of television, receive a Based On credit for Family Channel's Bajillionaires, and write for shows like Hotel Transylvania the series, DNAs, and Dylan's Playtime Adventures. In 2023, he won a WGC Screenwriting Award for Dino Ranch episode Wings Over Dino Ranch, which he shares with Ben Joseph. Speaking of, Ben Joseph is based in Toronto and has an overseas Indian citizenship and is of Indian descent. Ben started off writing for the YTV tween comedy show It's Alive, and then for the teen variety show Jonovision at the CBC. He has an Emmy Award win for Rolie Polie Olie, and he has written over 200 animation scripts, including Totally Spies, Hotel Transylvania the series, The Day My Psycho, another butt-related show, which we will get into. There's a theme happening here, and many more. So thanks, everybody, for being here. And so, yeah, I'm curious, before we even get started, so The Day My Butt Went Psycho, what's that one about?
That's based on a series of children's books, actually.
Awesome.
The Day My Butt Went Psycho. It was like the most fun we had. And to this day, all the writers, we're all like, we have an idea for a great episode title, just all these puns on butts and butt-related puns, and we just have, we wish we could do them more, but it was amazing. It's about a guy and his best friend is his butt. And there's like Great White Butt, who's a villain, and it's a big complicated show, but it's very fun. If you ever watch it, it's pretty awesome.
I'm going to check it out. That's for sure. Now, is Wishfart a spinoff of The Day My Butt Went?
No, Wishfart is totally original. It's a leprechaun-based show, not a fart-based show. And I actually have the honor of having named the show Wishfart. So the showrunners one of them lives in my home, and they all had this massive list of potential show titles, and they were talking about it and arguing over this list like forever. And I was like, well, it's a show about leprechauns who give wishes, and kids love farts. So what about Wishfart? And they were like, yes.
I love it.
So that's how I got my start writing too. So I was like,
excellent. So, and I think, I talked to you a bit just before the panel, Christine, and you said you're relatively new to the children's animation world. And Mike, you were saying that you were somewhat new and you've done a lot of script coordinating and things. And Ben, you've probably been the most experienced of the three. I was curious for Ben, how much do you notice has changed over the years in the business as opposed to now, like from when you started?
We get maybe slightly more money from 25 years ago, slightly. I think there's way more writers these days. There's way more shows, but there's way more writers. And so there's less opportunity for show, you know, like there's more opportunities, but it's hard to get on shows because there's so many more writers. When I first started, I knew all the writers probably, and now there's so many. It's just you don't get paid much more than I did 25 years ago, to be honest. I think when we started, we would get $3,500 for an 11-minute episode. And now what are we at to, like maybe 4,000 25 years later? So you're maybe $500 more after 25 years. It's not like the greatest leap of money, but I think it's easier to get in now and harder to make a living.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, honestly, because I've been in children's since 2007, and I can definitely concur with that I have noticed no increase in pay at all. Like, I mean, since then, it's the same as it was then. So, I mean, I guess there's a few venues where it's gone up slightly, like you're saying, but several where it hasn't gone up at all. Like, it's the same as it was in 2007. So it's kind of crazy. And in one instance, who shall remain nameless, less. It's actually gone down.
Yeah, I got paid less. Yes, there's non-union stuff that you can do and you get paid really badly.
But yeah, but it's interesting you would say that. No, so do you find that the environment is just more competitive now? That's the idea? This goes out to anybody, by the way.
Well, I think it's more like there's more opportunities for diverse writers, first off, right? So there's more of an influx of diverse writers coming in. And there's like spots for them to get in, but it's just harder to sustain, like to get on a show and last and write 8 episodes on a series. You know, like you might come in and do one and then you're done. And then you got to try and get another show. Maybe you'll get one, and 4 months later, you get another one. And it's hard to make a living like off $10,000 a year. Like it's pretty crazy. Mike, you know what it's like. You're starting out. Like when you started out, how hard was it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say that my dream is to work on a butt or fart related show. So
you're gonna get
that. I'll get there one day.
It'll happen.
But yeah, it was definitely a challenge. I mean, when I first started, I spent like a year just buying people coffee and saying, I want to be a writer. How do I do it? And, you know, that was really like a solid year. And then only after several months went by did like one of the producers who I bought coffee for was like, hey, I have like a script coordinating gig coming up. Do you think you could do it? And I was like, absolutely. When, of course, I couldn't. I knew nothing about anything. So that was a really fun trial by fire. And it sort of gets the ball rolling and at least gets you in the room. It gets you kind of experienced in like understanding story and working with other writers and what the room is like. But definitely like getting in the room is still a big challenge.
Yeah. And I think too, like I had the same experience. I was a script coordinator, a writer's assistant, changes depending on where you work, what they call it. But I did that for about a decade prior to really becoming like a writer, you know, full time. And yeah, I think it can be very valuable. You can tell kind of the people who have done that and the people who haven't in terms of how much they know about how things work, because you're really right in the thick of it, you know. But yeah, now for you, Christine, again, you said you're relatively new. You kind of had a different path to it. You were a PhD and everything. How did you kind of announce your presence on the landscape as far as that goes? Like when you wanted to be a writer?
Well, it's kind of similar to me, or it's similar for me, where it's hard to kind of get those experiences that are sustained. So I was on a bit of a different career path. I was thinking I wanted to be in academia, and then I just realized I wasn't really enjoying it. And everybody around me was writing cartoons. And I was like, this is so much fun. Why am I doing this? So I got a couple of opportunities, but as everybody's speaking about, like, it's very difficult to kind of sustain that. So I guess I'm just trying to sort of keep my, keep meeting people, as you say, Mike, keep meeting people and get out there and just stick around.
Now, and you had brought up an interesting point that it may not be necessarily super hard to get work, one episode on a show here and there, but it is hard to make a living at it, especially when you're only doing the freelance. If you had your own show and it got picked up and you're the producer, maybe less so. But yeah, when you're doing just freelance, do you have any advice for writers out there who kind of struggle with just trying to make a living at it? Like, is there any tips that any of you have?
save your money, but when you get paid, you get your first gig, you're like excited. You're like, oh, I'm going to go to Vegas or whatever. But, you get the taxes off of it. You get GST off, HST off it. It's just, and then you don't work for another 5 months, right? Like, or you have another gig coming and they're like, oh, it got delayed. They went to MIP and it got delayed. And then they promised you. And then like, oh, the show doesn't go because of budgeting. You might not get another show, but in your free time, all you can do is just get better at your craft, right? So watch movies, read books, watch plays, read comic books, write your own stuff, write specs. You can work on everything that you can do until your opportunity comes, because you never know when someone's going to say, hey, I have a show. Can I read your spec? And you're like, well, I don't have one right now. Can you, you want to be prepared for when lightning strikes. You want to be like, I've got a feature script. I've got an animated script. I've got a, Brooklyn Nine-Nine script, whatever, you have something ready to go, and constantly like just keep improving your skills, because that's all you can do. There's no magic way, because we'd be working all the time if there's an answer to it. You just have to be in the right place at the right time. Hope your friends hire you. Hope your producer likes your stuff. It's all random. Like I've been freelance for 25 odd years, and it's just like, I don't know how to keep working, but it's just people like, I don't have an agent. I fired my agents before. And so it's just basically like people call you up and be like, hey, do you want to work on this show? And you're like, okay. And then sometimes you're working on 4 shows at the same time, and sometimes you're working on 0 shows, for 4 months. You're like, where did it go? So just keep working on your own stuff. That's what you can control, is your own material, and go out and kind of go to those, I think Karen Walton has those ink drinks, and, there's all those sort of writer events like this, and you listen to people, and maybe you can meet people when we go back to doing it live and stuff. It's a little better, but I don't think we're ever going back to being live. But just work on your own stuff and try and get out of your shell and meet people and write stuff and go to direct producers and email them, and hopefully they'll respond to you. And Mike, how did you get your story edit coordinator gig, your first one?
Yeah. So the advice that I would give is like, and this is not the only way. Like there's a million different ways you can do it. But like for me, it was like, get a job that is in the business somehow. And so for me, like I started out as an actor, so I was very lucky that I had a lot of connections kind of made from when I did my acting time. And through that, I got a CMPA mentorship and worked in development at DHX, which is now WildBrain. But so that was really like my first kind of step into the behind the scenes stuff. Working in development, where I got to see tons of pitches. I got to meet with producers and sit in on pitch sessions. So like I really got a perspective that was really useful now that I'm on the other side. So like working as a development assistant, working even as like a PA or an AD, or really just anything in the business where you can like get your feet wet, meet producers, meet other writers, get an understanding of what the business is. And then from there, like you can sort of respectfully be like, hey, by the way, I'm interested in writing. Would you be interested in reading my spec? Or like, do you mind if I like sit in on the writing room? Or like, I can be a PA, if you ever have like a writer's PA spot you need. So there's like, once they kind of get to know you and come to trust you, it becomes a lot easier to get your foot in the door. And that was the case for me. Like I just bought a lot of producers lunch, and that got me my first script coordinating gig. And once I got in that room, it sort of, I met some writers, and then I got another room, and then I met Ben, and then I got another room. And so it sort of snowballs after that, I think.
Yeah. And I think, you're bringing up an interesting point, both of you, kind of different points, but they tie together, which is just getting your foot in the door anywhere. I mean, like a lot of the freelance scripts on shows that I've worked on as like a showrunner, a lot of them come from inside the building, if I can, because you're trying to, it's like, oh, I want to work with those kind of people. So if you come in and, you're doing what you have to do, I mean, and you have, a good spec, like Ben was saying, like you can move up. I mean, like you have opportunities there. There are opportunities.
Can I just add one more thing, Michael? I think there's things like TAFE in Toronto, like the Toronto Arts, I don't know what the acronym stands for, or the Ottawa Animation Festival. If you want to get into animation that's a good festival kind of to go to meet people, to meet producers, because you could sign up for meetings and do quick pitches or listen to panels and talk to people and meet other people who have the same mindset as you. And it's a good way just to meet people and, meet them. And then later on, when we get back to Toronto, can I buy you a coffee? Yeah. Okay. Like sort of, there's ways to do it. Like it might not work, but it might work. So,
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think too, I mean, the other thing is now, how many of you, like, and again, talking about making a living, do any of you do things that are not animation? Will you work in live action? Do you do any of that kind of stuff? Any kind of like, I know I have a few friends who do joke writing for people, things of that nature. Do you do any kind of stuff like that? Any kind of side hustle, so to speak?
Christine,
I do some side writing.
So what kind of writing do you do on the side?
It's copywriting. Yeah.
Okay, but still it's related.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a creative field, so you're doing that to kind of help supplement. Yeah. Okay.
It definitely like flexes the writing muscle. It's not the same type of stuff, but it actually keeps you fresh for when you get to do the animation writing, I find, because you're like, you're still doing it, and then you get this hunger for doing the other thing. So it's I think it's a good experience.
Okay. I mean, I think anybody, Ben or Mike, do you guys do any kind of other type of writing? Do you do live action or any of that? Or sometimes I'll be honest, like I do Hallmark movies. That's my thing on the side. I do like those, those rom-coms. Like I do them once in a while, but that also really helps to supplement the income.
Mike, you do like your YouTube stuff, right? You have like a comedy stuff.
Yeah, well, I don't really make money off that. I have a little sketch comedy thing that I do sometimes for fun, but it's more of like a muscle flexing exercise than anything. Maybe one day we'll make money off it, but it's like script coordinating has been really helpful to supplement the writing. Yes. I mean, that's really been the main thing for me. I've also, like I said, I've taken other jobs in other positions too. I was a production coordinator. I was a PA. I worked in development. So it's kind of like, it's been helpful to get a perspective from different angles. But at the end of the day, like, writing is where my heart is. So that's what I try and do most of the time. But even in script coordinating, you get to see all the scripts, you get to, see all the notes, be involved in the meetings and stuff. So it's a helpful way to kind of supplement your income when you're just like still at that earlier stage.
Well, it's funny. I had a person I worked with quite a bit over the years, and I found out, I had lunch with her, same kind of stuff like you're saying. You always got to stay up with people. And she said, "Oh yeah, we had so much trouble looking for a script coordinator on this show of mine that I just finished." And I said, "Why didn't you call me?" And she was like, "Oh, you don't want to do that. You're doing, you're doing this." I was like, "It's a weekly paycheck. What are you, nuts?" Like, because I was a writer on the show. I was like a freelance writer. And she's like, "Why would you as one of my writers?" I was like, "I could do that too. What are you talking about?" Like,
Totally.
There's also a danger in that though, Mike. It's like you get typecast as a script coordinator, and then no one sees you other than that. And it's hard to, like, even in our industry, if you're a preschool writer, you're a preschool writer. Like you can't write 8 to 11. You can't write live action. Live action people could come in and write anything, but animation writers have a harder time crossing over if you're typecast. Like I was a preschool writer when I first started, when I just did a lot of preschool happen chance, and then, "Oh, you're the best preschool writer. You should do preschool all the time." Like, I kind of don't want to, but
yeah, you
get paid, so you do it.
Definitely, yeah. There's definitely a lot of that for sure. Like I've had things like, even a friend of mine had a 6 to 11 kind of show on Nickelodeon, and he was like, "Well, I mean, that's not really for you, though. I mean, you're a preschool." I can write for a 4-year-old, but 6, that's too much. That's too much.
Yeah. Don't push it, Mike. Stay in your lane.
Yeah, as if it was like The Godfather or something. I'm like, "Oh, that's too much." But
I have worked on some live action stuff, like as a script coordinator, not as a writer. But back to what Ben was saying, part of the challenge is like, just because you're script coordinating on a show doesn't mean you're going to get scripts. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. And sometimes like, for instance, on one of the first shows I coordinated, like I got really close with the showrunner. He came to trust me. It was a really good relationship. And he says, Mike, in that season 2, you're going to get that script, it's coming at you. And then of course, season 2 doesn't happen. So, if you want to pursue that line of like the path to being a writer, you have to just kind of accept that it's not always going to happen. And you just have to kind of like, keep going.
Particularly in the primetime stuff, because I did that for like 5 years prior to moving to kids and never once got a script, not one time. And it was always like, oh, this year you will, and never. But that's why that's actually what finally gave me the move to kids was I said to one of the writers, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I'm not even getting a single, I've been on it for 5 years. I don't even get a single script. And, and there you're doing like, I was doing sitcoms. So I was up till like 3 a.m. every night. You go in at 9, you come home at 3. And it's like, this is nuts. Like, I'm not getting anything out of this. And so he said, you should move to kids. Kids are a little more willing to do that. And so, and they were. So that's kind of how I got started in kids, was kind of that frustration you're speaking of, where it's like, oh, or the same thing you're saying where, oh, season 2. Yeah, season 2, definitely. And there is no season 2. That happened like 3 times. But yeah, I think that's definitely good advice as far as other venues to get. I think that's something to keep in mind too. As Ben was saying, a lot of the work is freelance, if not probably 99% of it. The kind of, staff jobs are like the kind of carrot they dangle in front of you that most people don't ever get. And so these idea of just kind of keeping your mind open, I think, to what other kind of possibilities are out there. Now, Mike, do you ever act anymore?
I still have an acting agent. I do a little bit of voice stuff here and there, but really mainly focused on the writing and production stuff.
Okay. Now,
he's got a face for writing, Mike. So
I do. Yeah.
Hey, you never know. You never know. But also voice acting, of course, you're doing animation. You could get in some voice acting.
Yeah. I mean, they when Ben and I wrote on Hotel Transylvania, mostly to bully me, they put me, they gave me a role in the show. So just as like a little day player and stuff. So that was fun. But yeah, mostly on the writing side.
Okay, and so you bring up an interesting point, and Ben, it sounds like I already know where you lie on this a little bit, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So I think one of the things that particularly like younger writers, they think, oh, if only I can get an agent, that's it. I'll be in Spielberg's office by the end of the week and, whatever. Like, so how have been your experiences with agents or managers? Do you feel like, are they essential for people's success, or how do you feel?
They help, right? For sure. Because they can get you don't know, when you're starting out, you don't know anybody, right? You don't know producers, you don't know broadcasters, you don't know story editors or anything. You know your little small circle. So obviously, if you can find an agent who will take you on, right? It's good because they have connections, and if one of their writers gets staffed on a show as a story editor, maybe they'll try and staff their own clients on the show. So maybe they'll put you onto the show. I just was around. I've been around for so long. I know everybody. So I was just getting gigs by myself, and my agents would take 10% or whatever it is. And they were like, well, you didn't really do anything. You just read a contract, which I could read. No one's going to screw you over because the Writers Guild is pretty, good with contracts. So it's also when you have an agent, it's a kind of, you think, oh, I don't have to do any work. You have to work really hard. You have to like find out producers, and find out what they're looking for, and then ask your agent, hey, can you send this over to them? Because your agents aren't working for you particularly nonstop unless you're a higher end guy. So it's a when you're starting out, you think you really need an agent, and you probably do just to get connections and everything. But later on in life, my friends always have it for like reading contracts, and like if you're running a show or something, you're going to need an agent to do all the contract work and the minutia of legalities and stuff. But I had an American agent for, 15 years, 12 or 15 years, and they're great, but they just weren't getting me work here. And so I said like, hey, I don't think it's working out, but if I need you, I will use you to negotiate for me. And if you get me work, I will give you my percentage off. So I have like the best of both worlds where I could get work on my own. But that's just rare. No one else has that. I just looped out.
And I think, I would agree that probably most of my work at this point just comes from people I know. Not all of it, but most of it. And then, but I will say my manager is pretty good about getting me to new people, because I am the worst at it. Like, you have to kind of know your limitations. Like, I don't do that. I'm not a guy who likes to like, go to these kind of networking events. So in that sense, for me, an agent is a good thing because they can somewhat do that. But I think I definitely fell into the trap you're describing, Ben, because I got an agent and assumed, well, that's the end of that. And I definitely fell into that trap. And like for like 2 years did not get anything because he wasn't getting me stuff. And I was like, well, why am I supposed to do it? You're supposed to do that, and so there definitely was, luckily when I got him, I had a job. So I was able to kind of coast on that for a while, but yeah, then nothing came in after that. And I was like, wait, aren't you not supposed to be doing this? I definitely was under that impression. I was like, well, I'm never going to have to do anything again. He's going to do it all.
Well, the best part of an agent or a manager is they can be the bad guy for you. So if you don't want to do a show or you want to get out of a show and you don't want to burn a bridge, your agent could take the hit for you, right? They're the pain sponge, So, but I think Tom in Succession would be. That's also good. Or if you're shy or you're not really good, like you said, at meeting people, they're great. But it's hard to get an agent now because there's so many writers out there, right? And it's really hard. And also, if you get signed, you're like, they might have a roster of like 100 people. And so where are you in terms of like how much time you get with them and how much time are they going to spend with you? Or are they going to pitch you on the show? Or are they going to pitch their 5 other writers on the show before you, right? Like there's always finding that was a problem. Like, oh, we're pitching you for this show, but they also pitched their entire roster. So you're going against like another 30 people and it's kind of bad, but it's, there's good and bad parts of everything. So,
yeah. Now, Christine, how about, do you have an agent for your stuff?
Well, I'm glad I'm hearing all this stuff from Ben because I just got an agent. So. But I feel like it's kind of I feel very fortunate having won this award. It's like a good moment for me to lead in, and I'm going to have those opportunities to meet more people with the agent because before this, I have been getting work through colleagues. Mm-hmm. And so I'm interested to see, who I can meet and where that might lead. And also having that reality, knowing that this is kind of a hard time with this kind of slowdown in the industry. So just facing this new agent relationship with kind of my eyes open. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. But yeah.
Okay.
Good tips.
Now, Mike, you said you have an acting agent. Do you have a writing agent as well? Or is it the same person or no?
Yeah, I have a writing agent as well. Different person. My advice on the agent thing would just be, and I know this is not going to be the case for everyone, but it's much easier to get an agent, a writing agent, if you bring them something. If you can go to them and say, I have a producer who's interested to option this. I need your help to negotiate it, which is how I did it, which I was very lucky that I was in that position to be able to do that, but it made it very easy for me to get an agent. Or if you can, get staffed on a show and say, I need you to look this contract over for me just through your networking and then use that to leverage an agent. That's another way that I think is a little bit easier than just cold sending them a script because they're going to get a million of those. So for me, that was the way to secure an agent. But it was a weird thing because I was so used to an acting agent who, they constantly send you out for stuff. And so I'm sitting back kind of waiting for my writing agent to send me out for stuff. And it was just not the same experience. So it was definitely a learning curve there.
Yeah. Now, so I know we're going to get to the audience Q&A in a few minutes here, but I did want to ask too, since you are all winners of the WGC Award, is there anything you would say to kind of the writers watching this as far as for their writing that you would advise them to do in order to kind of get some notoriety like you've received for this award, like some kind of a skill or subject matter to write about, any kind of thing like that? We can start with Christine. Is there anything you think maybe anything you did kind of when you were writing this episode that you would advise people to do or things to think about when you're prepping and all that kind of stuff?
I think it's possibly because I'm a little bit newer to this kids animation that I'd like to think that I bring some details to the scripts that are a little maybe less familiar and maybe a little fresher. But And I think also that for the episode that I wrote, like it has a really strong overall concept and it has some really sweet friendship moments. Like, for instance, there's this moment where one of the main characters, she's this normally fearless girl character, and she has to like battle her biggest, baddest fear. And she relies on friendship power, like to get through it. And so as I was writing it, like, I know that if my eyes are watering when I've written like a sweet friendship moment, that I've probably done a good job. And so I hope that that's what the readers were picking up on. So if there's something that moves you as you're writing and you can sort of deliver that, I think it goes a long way.
Okay. What about you guys, Ben and Mike? Any advice you would give to kind of how to get the attention of an award like the WGC Award for your scripts?
Well, when I write on any show, the goal is to write the best episode of that series, right?
Oh.
It could be the worst show in the entire world. Like, it could be like I don't want to say it could be like a really bad show, but my goal is to write the best episode of that series. And so if anybody watches it, can be like, oh, I hate the show, but that episode was freaking good. You also learn from everyone you write with, right? So we wrote with Dan Smith on Dino Ranch, and I've worked with Dan when I first started. He was one of my mentors, right? Like, so he hired me originally for like, I think Tales from the Crypt Keeper, and I wrote a script for him, an animated script, and he gave me back the second draft, and it had one word in it that I wrote, probably in 30 pages. It was like maybe the word "but" was in there on page 7, and he's just like, no, you did a great job. And I'm like, what? How did I do a great job? It's completely rewritten. But that's just the way he did it, and you give him enough, uranium, and he can make, he can make something powerful. We were lucky, Mike and I were lucky that Dan was from like an artistic background, kind of. He was a storyboard guy, like an artistic guy. And so he writes in kind of a sweeping film way, like pan over the valley, swoop down into. So most scripts aren't like that. Most scripts aren't fun to read in animation. They're interior, cafeteria day, you walk up to the counter, but he writes it like not flowery in terms of like being annoyingly flowery, but like he writes it like an visually interesting way to read a script. And so we were lucky that we get to write in that style. And so the judges for WGC would read it and be like, okay, this is a fun read, this is a great epic read, right, Mike? Like, don't you feel like it was
totally. It was a different kind of writing. It was a different kind of muscle that we were flexing a little bit on that one. But one thing that I just want to add that like Ben taught me is that, when you're first writing on a show and you're just new, it's like you want to impress the story editor, and so you want to act like all the answers and you have all the things. But something that Ben really showed me was that like it's okay to ask questions, and it's okay to reach out and send a quick note to the story editor and be like, hey, this isn't quite working. What about this? And they will either say yes, or they will have a better idea, or whatever it is. But the thing not to do is to surprise them with like these. You have some genius idea, and then you like put it in, and it changes a bunch of stuff. And so that really opened my eyes. It's like you don't want to write the thing that you want to do. You want to write the show that they need you to make. And so that was a big shift for me that Ben taught me.
And when you sign your contract, your first draft's yours, right? First draft's yours. Second draft with the notes and the polish, that's theirs. So you got to do what they want after that. Your first draft's your attempt at what you think it is. And your first draft, you want to, like every draft, you want to give them like, it's never going to be perfect. You want to give them like 80% good. So on a Sunday when they have to fix it up or something, it takes them an hour instead of 8 hours to do. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's like no surprises. Like, don't surprise them, because your surprise might be a genius idea, but they might have already done it on another episode that you haven't even seen yet. And so they're going to like, screw, I have to rewrite this. It's going to take me, I can't spend the afternoon with my kids on a Sunday. I have to spend it rewriting this stupid script. And how many scripts are you going to get after that? Probably 0. So just ask as many questions as possible. I think the key is don't ask them individually, like every hour ask a question. Have sit on it for a day and then write an email with like, here's 5 questions and here are my solutions. What do you think of my solutions? And don't just write questions and expect them to answer it for you, because that's why don't they just write it for you at that point? So try and write questions, pitch answers, If they don't like it, like, oh, we've already done that. No, that's not this show. No, that's going to take too long to get to. Try this. And then you don't surprise them when they get the script on a Sunday morning. It takes them an hour to fix it up, send it off. You're going to get another script. Like, just make everyone's lives easier. Make your life easier. Don't be a hero. Like, just be smart about it and suck it up. And everybody has questions. And you don't look stupid asking questions. You look stupid when you don't get another script.
Yeah, I will say, as a many times story editor on these shows, 100% correct. Like, do not add something that's like a subplot that wasn't in the outline to the script, because this has happened on multiple occasions. We are doing it in another episode. So it's like, this whole thing was a waste of your time, my time, everybody's time. You know, even if it's a good idea, or if you're like, hey, I have an idea, as you're saying, just email it and say, hey, you know what if we add that? Like, I'll say, oh, you know what, we're doing that actually in episode 14. But yeah, it's a good idea. But yeah, don't do that. You know, that's as easy as it can be to fix that problem. And I would agree, like, not saying you won't get another script. It probably depends on the relationship I have with you. But if I don't know you and this is your first one, you're not getting another one probably if you do that. Because as you're saying, I don't want to spend Sunday doing that. I want to spend it in the park. But, you know, I think that's 100% accurate. Well, we'll get to a few of these questions from the audience. We have some good questions here. We can start with this one. This is a good thing for a lot of the emerging writers. What are your opinions on writing fellowships like the Nickelodeon program? And there's a bunch of others as well. Have any of you guys had any experience with those?
A lot of them are for American writers only too. So you have to watch out for that. But you know what? I had friends who have done stuff and they've gone to like the CMF stuff too, right? Like the Canadian Film Center stuff. Do it. Like, if you can enter, there's no harm and there's no downside, is what I'm saying. Like, just do it. If you fit the requirements and you want to do it, like, just what would be the bad part of doing it? Like, you get turned down, who cares? Like, your life's the same, you know. You get picked and people see your script and read you. Like, there's no downside to applying for things. Like, even like a final draft screenwriting, you know, awards or like, you know, other contests. Like, what's the downside? You get people to read your script, they give you some feedback, maybe you win something, you put on your resume and other people want to hire you, right? Like, there's no downside to networking or to applying for things that you're capable of applying for, right? So just do it. Have
Christine or Mike, have you had an experience with contests or fellowships, anything like that?
I haven't. No.
Okay.
Plenty of applications. That's about as far as they go. But yeah, I would agree with Ben. Like, it's helpful to even just give yourself a deadline. You're like, okay, I have to finish this thing by the time to submit this for this thing. But I would also just, on the flip side, caution about, like, there's so many that are just money grabs. So, like, just be choosy about which ones you do and look into them. And
I was going to say too, there's some online resources that kind of help to point you to which ones are and which one aren't. So I would definitely research it. Yeah. On that same rationale, on that same front, kind of, we have another question here about Kidscreen. The question is, what should an emerging writer do there, if even going at all? Is it worth the cost to go to Kidscreen if you're an emerging writer?
Well, it depends if you have like specs and stuff. Like, what do you hope to gain out of it, right? So if you're going to network people, there are things at Kidscreen, first off, is very pricey, right? Yeah. You have to pay to get there, and then you have to pay to go to Miami or New York or wherever it is, and then a hotel. Like, that's crazy. I would advise you to do the first time, if you're going to do it, Ottawa is a lot cheaper, a lot easier to get to. And I think it's a little less, you know, smaller scale, but I think it's just as good. Kidscreen's good if you're a little more mid-range, a little higher than a newbie, because it's going to be overwhelming for you if you don't know anybody there and you go and you have a fast track meeting with someone. And if you have a project you want to pitch and you believe in it and you think it's really, really good, yeah, go for it. You know, like, but it's pricey, and it's like, you got to know people. And it's hard to meet people there, like, because there's so many, everybody knows everybody, and they are going to party it up and hang out with each other.
And a lot of the time, I think people who go there, their meetings are pre-scheduled, so it's hard to just walk up to people. And also, I think probably depends. I don't know how you guys, Christina, Mike, feel about this, but probably depends on the kind of person you are too. Like me, like at those things, useless. I don't like to just like walk up to people and like start shaking hands. So I don't generally even go to stuff like that because it's a waste of my money. Like I'm not going to get anything done there. But I don't know. Have you guys had any experience with any kind of conferences like Kids Screen? There's a bunch of other ones as well, but any kind of conferences like that?
I've been to Kids Screen a couple of times, but I haven't purchased a pass. So I've been there kind of as an observer, and I know there's quite a few writers from Toronto who go, and there are opportunities to meet people without a pass. So you can like set up meetings with people. So if you do have a project, but you don't necessarily, if you do have a project that you want to pitch, you don't necessarily have to meet that person there either. It's a great way to get everybody in the same place. But I think it's also a place where people are purchasing shows and stuff. And so sometimes some writers could get lost in the shuffle a little bit. So yeah, if you really have a plan, I think it can be a great opportunity. But yeah, it's very pricey to go to get the pass and do the hotel.
Yeah. And yeah, all the traveling, of course, too.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't been to Kids Screen. I went to the Ottawa one in my development days, and it was really neat to sit in on the panels. And, there is some value there to just being an observer. But I guess for me, it's kind of like you don't have to go to Kids Screen to pitch stuff. You can still pitch stuff, through your agent or through meetings or through other things. So to me, it's like something I would consider probably when I'm a little higher up on the food chain, maybe, but
I think it's definitely more useful, particularly as you're saying, when you're higher up. But as you're saying, there could be some value if you have the money. Can't hurt. But yeah, I would agree that it's definitely more valuable if you're higher up and you're there to, especially if like, hey, I know the president of Nickelodeon. I'm going to go there and see him. And I know the guy from Netflix is here and this woman from Amazon or whatever. Like if you have those kind of connections, it's valuable because as Christine said, they're all in the same place, which is nice. You can kind of get it all done in one shot. But you
have to be memorable. They're going to have like 20 meetings in that day. Yeah. And like, how are they going to remember you over?
Well, that's the thing. That's why if you know them already, it'll be helpful. Yeah. If you're just meeting them for the first time, it's going to be a blur.
You can meet them in Toronto for half the price, find a way to, meet them at like, look up their email or whatever. And, the company that they work for, and then email that company and okay, can I go for coffee? Pretend you're in school, say it's a school project. Bam.
Now here's another question we have from one of the viewers. When writing for animation, is it possible to get your start as a creator and pitch your show to a network with no experience?
No. First off, animation creators, it's hard to pitch a show in animation right now if you're not an artist. Like they really want art. They want to see it. They love creating. If you're an artist who's a creator, it's like 100% easier than a writer who has an idea in animation right now. That's all I'm going to say. And mostly a lot of the studios do a lot of in-house hiring where like they hire an animator that they have who has an idea for a show because then they own it and there's no sharing of IP or anything. If you're a writer though, and you have a great idea and they happen to like it, they're not going to use you as the writer. You have no experience. They don't trust you. You don't know how to do it. They're going to put you together. They're going to hire a veteran writer to come in and they'll just take over and you're going to maybe become a producer on it. Maybe you'll write an episode.
Now I will say, I know of one instance of this ever. There was a person, I worked on the show and I was brought onto it because of this, because the person who created it had never worked in television in any capacity. And I honestly still don't know how it happened. I've never heard of such a thing. It's the only instance I can think of. And they sold a show to PBS, a kid's show, and had never worked in TV, and they never even worked in entertainment. They were a college professor. It was very odd. And I think it's almost the exception that proves the rule, because they had to then hire a bunch of people to be like, I have to show you how to make a show because you don't know what's going on. You know,
it's incredibly hard to, if you have no experience to do anything.
it's definitely not something I would try to pursue because it's almost kind of a fool's errand. Now, have any of you guys had any experience with that? Trying to hear
Mike? Mike?
Yes, I mean I've had a couple of things optioned that were didn't quite work out as you might hope. Part of that is at the time I was even more inexperienced. I was very green, and so that similar kind of thing happened. They brought in a more experienced writer, and you kind of fall out of it a little bit at that point. But definitely now I'm like interested in creating shows. I mean, I think that would be an ultimate kind of dream at this point. So I think once you have a bit of experience under your belt, it becomes much easier to at least open that door. But I would say for anyone who's like starting out, it's helpful to have like an original pilot to use as like a sample, but it is quite hard to convert that into an actualized show. But it's great to have as just a sample.
And well, that's the other thing too. This is actually not a question from the audience. This is just something I wanted to bring up, and Ben brought it up. So I'm going to just throw this in as kind of an addendum to the last one. So when you're pitching a series, how much stuff do you bring as far as art, or I know some now that even bring animation to the pitch. How much stuff do you think that you need to bring now when you're pitching a series to a network?
Well, if you're bringing art and an animation, you probably have a production company tied to you at some level, right? If you're a writer, if you just pay an artist to do some stuff for you, what if they don't like the art, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of tied yourself into something. You're a writer. I'm talking about as a writer's perspective. We're not artists here. You're a writer. Your idea is what you're pushing. So let them think of what it should look like, right? You could reference things. Less is more probably, because these producers go through like how many hundreds of ideas a month to look over. It's very hard. As I said, like without art, it's very hard for a lot of producers to visualize things too, because they don't have a lot of imagination. Mostly, like they read something, they can read a Bible. And they could think you could interpret it as a drama or as a comedy, as a horror. Like it depends on how you're feeling that day and how you're reading it. And a certain word might percolate in your head, and you're like, "Oh, it's a horror show for 18-year-olds," and you're like, "No, it's a preschool show." Like Caillou, I guess there's no magic answer, right? Like you could try it with art. You could have a talent. If you have like an actor or something. That you envision voicing your character or playing the role in your live action stuff, then that might help. It depends. It's like everything that we can tell aspiring writers, it depends on the situation.
I feel like because it's a visual medium that it does help because as writers, we do create the show Bible that does have suggestions about the aesthetic for the show. So I think it's at least something like a lookbook, or at least like maybe it won't make it into your show Bible, but contemplating that and what that would look like helps you define those things in words anyway. So I think it's really useful.
A lookbook's a great idea because it helps you with the tone too, right? Like here's the tone, like you could feel it, but some people don't. Like it depends. Some companies don't want a lot of stuff. Some people want art. Some people don't want art. Everyone's finicky and they change their minds every year. So
yeah,
it's hard to figure out. If you have an agent, they can help, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, it does seem like, a lot of times, like a lot of the magic words at these places are mandate. Like I have a mandate for this right now. And that seems to change with the wind. I mean, it doesn't not even every year, every month.
Yeah.
Or you kind of get the thing where you go in. I had this happen once. I don't know if you guys have had experience with this, where I went in and pitched at Nickelodeon. The person I pitched to loved it. They literally said, "Don't sell this. If somebody wants to buy it, you come back to me." Right. And so then I didn't hear from them for 2 weeks. And I called over their office like, "Oh yeah, he's fired. He's gone."
I had that. Yeah. She quit.
And I was like, "Well, where did they go? Because I get this thing that they like." But
did you track them down?
I did not. I think they left. I think they were like, "Oh, that's it. I'm done." But I never heard from them again. But which is telling me that he definitely would have bought it because he was like, I'm quitting the business. I'm never talking to you again. So we have a question here specific to the Canadian market. As far as if you are a writer in Canada, as you said, a lot of the advice comes based on US stuff when you read stuff online. So if you're specific to the Canadian market, where do you find the people you should connect with? And, like what cities, or online, where to go, that kind of thing. Do you guys have any advice for that?
Like, I don't know. Like, there's all those, like, the Ottawa Animation Festivals, for Toronto-based people in Canada. Mm-hmm. There's that Toronto Arts Cafe that they run. You just have to be kind of aware of, like, join writing groups on Facebook or something. There's probably, places on there where they have it, but like even ink drinks with Karen does ink drinks, once now she started up, I think once a month. First one's Wednesday, I think this week, actually. I don't know. It's tricky. Yeah. You could follow the WGC on Facebook too. Emily just piped in. And so, there's different sites, or are you on Twitter? Like, and there's all these, like, WGC sometimes has like interviews with creators, or where you could come in and sign in and watch them, and maybe sometimes they'll do them live. Hopefully they used to do them live, but there's all these little panels everywhere that you just have to be kind of in the loop, and you have to Google it up, I guess. Mm-hmm.
Are there any places that Christine or Mike, any places you like to go to see stuff like that?
I've done ink drinks a few times. There's a few other, like, kind of writerly events that you can find on, like, Facebook groups and things like that. Like Ben was saying, I'm sure the WGC does them as well. But I would just say, like, if, like, the way that worked the best for me was to, like, reach out to individual writers and producers and just be like, hey, let me buy you coffee, and pick your brain. I just want to learn more about the business. And most people are pretty open, and writers will never say no to free coffee. So
sounds like someone's wanting some free coffee from everyone here, Mike. I think.
If anything, bribe the other people on this panel, not me. But yeah, it's been a way that's worked for me.
Okay. Now where did you find that you do that? It's like people you've met and then you reach out to them again, or is it like LinkedIn? Like, where do you go for these kind of things?
Yeah, I guess you could do LinkedIn. I mean, I have a weird. Was in a weird spot because, like, I had acted for so many years as a kid that, like, I had this network sort of built up, and, like, I would reach out to people who had written on shows that I acted on. So I had a bit more of a direct path. But for someone who doesn't have that, I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Like, do you respond to your LinkedIns? Like, is that a tangible way to do it?
I mean, I do some. I mean, not all the time, but most of the time, I'll send a message back. I have met, I think, probably like 3 or 4 people off of LinkedIn, like in, as they say, IRL, in real life. I have met them a few times here and there. But, I think it just depends on kind of the situation. But yeah, I mean, it's not the worst thing ever, I guess. I find that I do that more than I do, like, kind of social media that's more like private stuff. Like, if I have pictures of my kid, I'm not just talking to some random person off the internet. If LinkedIn is a different situation.
For sure.
I just want to jump in and mention 2 groups that are in Toronto for anyone who's interested. There's Women Drawn Together is a great group to join. It's on Facebook, run by Michelle Mellinson. And before the pandemic, there was a lot of, like, sort of monthly or bi-monthly meet and greets with different animation studios. Invited us into their spaces, and there was all kinds of different topics. It wasn't only writer focused, but there was a lot of writers who went there. So that's a great one. And also Jerome Simpson, again in Toronto, runs something called Writer PD Days. And there's a lot of screenwriters who take part and just meet. And, writers tend to be a little bit isolated and off in their own little worlds. So that was a great thing to kind of just bring people together and do some writing exercises and meet each other. So that's also you can find that on Facebook. Okay.
That's great. Thank you for that. So I think we're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes. I did have a couple other questions here from the audience. So I know, Ben, you had brought up earlier how there's a big push for, finding new voices and diverse writers, of course. are there opportunities for neurodiverse writers right now, do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think I know one show that they're doing, right? And so if you have a knowledge of something, or your background culturally or whatever it is that, and you have a take on how to do it, right? They're always interested in people because that's a hot topic now, actually, right? Mm-hmm. And so for sure, if you have a great way to do it, a take on it, and that's fresh and cool, people will want to read it. That's a good way to get your foot in the door. It's reading something that you don't know anything, like most producers wouldn't know about it as much. So, and there's always a call for writers from different cultural backgrounds and whatever backgrounds that can help give us a different flavor to a show, right? Because before, back in the day, no offense to everyone, but it was like 10 white guys. It was just like, hey, here's 10 white guys writing a show. And so it's slowly changing, and, it's the 9 white guys now, and maybe there's more. It's like it's a big change, and there's more opportunities for different cultures and different backgrounds to apply put their ideas in play and give different takes on episodes. Like Michael, you were talking about the one you won for. It was like like talk about death in a preschool show, right? Like, so the standard preschool ideas and kids show ideas are, being tested, and people can do different things now, right? So
yeah. Well, the funny thing is that show, it was Eleanor Wonders Why. I pitched an episode last season about death, but we did it as like, kids this age, their grandmothers are going to pass away and all that. So we did it where it was a tree that her grandmother planted rather than the grandmother. So it's not too intense. But the funny thing is, in talking about neurodiversity and things, I'm in the process right now of pitching an episode on that show about a kid with autism coming to their group of friends. So I think, they want things of that nature, just kind of, all the kind of different backgrounds and different things. So I think, it's all about just doing it correctly. And, and that's the hard part sometimes. Also, if you are a neurodivergent writer, you could also sort of take that and be like, hey, if you need a consultant on your show to make sure that this is, appropriate, then like, I was a cultural consultant on the show with an Indian family on it because it was written by white guys, but like they needed to make sure it was like culturally appropriate and there wasn't anything. So like there is, you can use that to your advantage and get into a show and write an episode of a show. Like just use what you got, Yep. No, agreed, 100%. So the final question here from the audience is kind of any advice you might have if you are, from a Canadian writer, if you are not living in, say, the Toronto area. Do you think it's still possible to break into the field if you live in a different part of the country? Like, has COVID helped with that at all? Like, has COVID helped it? Look, I'm going to be online. You're never going to meet me. Or do you find that you still really have to be in the Toronto area to succeed? One quick note on that. There's a lot of companies that require the Ontario tax credit for the writers, right? So you have to have an Ontario address to be able to get to tax credit. So they want writers who are Ontario based or Vancouver based or whatever the tax credit of that show is. I don't know how prevalent it is these days with CanCon stuff or whatever, but that is a thing that you have to, you should be residing in Ontario. It's the internet. If you're a great writer, people want to use you no matter where you're from. And most rooms now aren't live anymore. They're all going to be probably Zoom hence going forward now. So I don't think it's going to hurt you, but it'll hurt you for networking, like appearing at an Ink Drinks or going to a, live event or something. But other than that, I don't think if you're a great writer, people will find you, you'll find them and figure it out. Well, this is something I'm curious about that you brought up there. How much of your work these days is online based? Like Christine, you were on the Guava Juice Show. Like how much of that do you have an office that you went to when you worked or was it all online? No,
that show got the go ahead just at the very beginning of the pandemic. So, it was a unique experience for me because my partner was one of the showrunners. And so it was kind of like being a script coordinator. Well, not a script coordinator, but like kind of like the show is being made in this apartment. So, you know,
so you're living in the office.
Yeah. So that was the office, and everything was online. I mean, the studio was in Vancouver, and so they did everything. All the showrunners were in Toronto. Everything was done online.
Now, is it still the case for everyone? Are you still working completely online, or have you gone back to live stuff at all?
It's always been online, you know, for the most part. Like you're an animation writer. You might go in for a writing room once every 2 months for 3 days or a week, right? And then you go back and you write. You talk on email or the phone occasionally. In my whole life, I've never really, you know, sometimes when you have to do live action stuff, you got to go in an office and they make you work like you know, free meals and stuff. But for the most part in animation, you stay at home and you work and you work in your pajamas and you wake up when you want to work and you send, like when I first started, I have like the whitest name. I'm like Ben Joseph. I'm like the last two tribes of Israel. Right. And then, and no one before the internet and stuff, like they'd be like, oh, email, it would just be email or phone call. They didn't know what I looked like. They didn't know who I was. Right. So I was like a young Jewish writer. And then like, oh my God, you're not, you know, you don't look like a young Jewish writer. Well, theoretically a quarter Jewish, but you know, but so, you know, it doesn't, you really work from home a lot, and it's just basically sending a script in, getting notes, you fix your script up, you send it back in, you get notes, you get it, you're done. You don't even need to meet people. But for writing rooms now, we're doing Zoom writing rooms, right? So 3 days on Zoom, you don't have to go anywhere. So I think that's going to be the new trend, and it's cheaper for everyone, and it's easier for everyone. So
I think that you hit the nail on the head there. It's not even now about COVID or anything else. They were like, look how much money we're saving by not having to rent these offices. I think that's really what it is. And I think for the most part, because the same thing, that Eleanor Wonders Why show, we did that entirely online, and we were doing it before it was cool. We started in 2018 and it was done completely online. And that was my first experience with that. I had always, prior to that, always been in an office somewhere. And now I don't know that that's ever coming back. I mean, I was just talking to my manager and he was like, yeah, don't get used to that. That's not happening anymore. Like they're just
we actually got kicked out of rooms for being too loud and for laughing too much. And so we'd have to just get kicked out of chorus all the time, or they'd send us to Bright Lane to an off-site office and we get kicked out for being too loud there and stuff. So I guess this is probably the best way to do it so we don't get kicked out anymore. But
so now, Mike, if you're a script coordinator, are you in an office with someone, or are you doing that from home as well?
I think it depends on the show. I mean, I've been working animation the last couple of years, so it's been all from home.
Right.
When I did live action, it was very much like, you got to be physically in the office. But the difference there too is that you're like, sometimes you're running around handing out scripts. Like there's just different responsibilities if you're coordinating live action versus animation. So for animation, it's definitely been all Zoom. Although now I'm starting to hear whispers of people being like, we can maybe start doing, rooms in person again. So we'll see if it comes back or not. But for the most part, it's been Zoom.
Yeah, I have a feeling that some of the bigger companies like the Disneys and those kind of companies will start going back eventually because, they just have the money to throw around and they already have the space. Like they own a giant studio, they might as well use it for something. But I think some of the more independent or smaller animation shows, I don't think they're ever going back because it's just such a money saver. It just makes a lot of sense. And I feel like I've found for the most part, it doesn't really affect the end product at all. It doesn't seem to. I mean, like the shows I've worked on during the pandemic have come out about as well as the shows I did before that, I feel like. So I don't know. How do you guys feel about that?
It's a different vibe though. You're doing a comedy. You want to be in a room and make everyone laugh, and you want to have a little small talk. Like on the Zoom, it's hard to do small talk and it's hard to do digressions. We had this thing where we would like always go off on these crazy digressions, but then we'd have rewards where if we want a reward, if we want to talk, we want to watch a movie trailer, we have to finish this episode in 25 minutes before we can watch a movie trailer, so we would do that. But like it builds better camaraderie live, obviously. Like you could talk and get to know people and make jokes and obviously it's just a lot better live for comedies, just making people laugh. It's hard to make people laugh on Zoom. It gets a cut delayed and somebody doesn't hear the joke and like you're afraid to talk because somebody else like you get cut off, and it's not the same, and it's troubling.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, definitely for comedy, it makes a lot of sense to be in the room. So at least at first, I think, for the first few weeks, and if you have to break off, I mean, I guess you can, but yeah, I would agree 100% with that. I don't know if we're allowed to go over an hour, but we're now almost at an hour and 10. So I guess we were so interesting, we just kept it going. But that's it for the audience Q&A. Did you guys have anything else you wanted to add before we get going? I can start with Christine. Anything?
No, I mean, this was, I learned a lot from you guys. Like, that's it. I don't know. This is a very useful conversation. So thank you, WGC, for hosting this, and great to meet you guys.
Yes, hopefully the audience felt the same way. How about you, Mike? Any last words there?
Yeah, I'll just echo Christine. I mean, thank you. It was a really fun, productive chat, and I hope to see you all at an Ink Drinks or something. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, go to those Ink Drinks. I am not familiar with that, but I'm not from Toronto, so it sounds like Ben, anything from you?
The one thing about Zoom meetings is they'll try and take advantage of you by not giving you a good lunch payment. So always try and hold out for like a $25 Uber Eats card or something for the Zoom meeting, so they pay you for lunch like you're in a real writing room. Or else, yeah, that's the good companies do it. Cheaper companies will be like, you're on your own. Go get your own lunch for 40 minutes. And you're like, come on.
That's right. All right. Well, I'd like to thank Christine Mitchell, Mike DeCenzo, and Ben Joseph for being here. And I'd also like to thank all of you for watching and for asking questions. We had a lot of great questions today. And finally, a big thank you to our sponsor, Department 9 Studios. We'll see you again at the next Writers Talking Screen. Have a good night.